Welcome. Today we are going to be covering witchcraft and devil worship in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Today we're looking specifically at witchcraft and what witchcraft was to the European mind during this period. What diabolical magic was, what kind of spells were used, what were the practices, and of course examples of individuals who were probably involved in the dark arts during the period. If you're more interested in non-harmful magic, general magic, folk magic in the period, we do have a video on that called Magic in the Middle Ages that I recommend checking out. In this video, we'll be looking exclusively at evil magic, or diabolical, right, magic. Now, the Church, the Inquisition, and secular authorities are pretty unconcerned with general practitioners of magic. It's kind of a misnomer of the period that they are. They're not really worried about magic. What they're worried about is witchcraft. Okay, now, witchcraft to these people, right, to the European mind during the time, witchcraft is defined as someone who has made a pact with the devil or a demon, or is trying to harness the power of such a creature in order to do harm unto others, right? So these demonic affiliations are very much associated with witchcraft during the period, right? So really what they're after is not practitioners of magic. What they're after is devil worshippers, more or less, here in this period. So a witch was not a fortune teller. It was not an herbal healer. It wasn't anything of the sort. A witch is an evil magic user who had dealings with demons or devils. Now, it's actually commonly thought that there were no devil worshippers or actual practitioners of evil magic in the period. And that's supported by the way that secular authorities and the Inquisition approach the accused, right? They're using torture to get confessions, okay? Today we see torture as a means of getting a bunch of fantasy or lies. You're not going to get the truth out of somebody if you torture them. Back then it was the opposite assumption, right? If we torture these people, they'll tell us the truth. Was the overriding idea. And so a lot of these cases are going to use torture and manipulation to get the answers they seek. And so we do have trouble ascertaining what's real and what isn't, what confessions are legitimate, which are fake. It is very difficult. So it makes sense that many people would believe that there were no devil worshippers during the period, or evil witches. There's one problem with this, however. The problem is grimoires. Okay, a grimoire is a magical book, and many of these grimoires actually have passages within them that speak on summoning demons or the devil or making a pact with one of them. So that is a problem, right? When they ascertain, hey, there were none, because people are writing books. Right? Some of these grimoires, the vast majority of the book is about summoning demons, right? So people are writing this about how to summon demons, make pacts with the devil, and then more disturbingly, people are buying, right, in wholesale, this stuff, right? This kind of material, these grimoires, and they're spreading throughout Europe. So this boogeyman, right, that Christianity is so concerned about, seems to be based on something that's actually happening, just basing it off written evidence. Medieval grimoires, this is where it's going to get a little gross, were specified to be written using virgin or unborn parchment. Now, what does that mean? It means they wanted their paper to be made out of virgin animals and out of the amniotic sacs of aborted fetuses. Animal fetuses, right? So the idea here is that they want virgin paper, they want innocent paper, so that the spells contained on it are uncontaminated, is the idea. They're clean. There's actually instructions in some of these grimoires on how to induce an abortion of an animal or to cut the uterus from dead animals in order to make this paper out of. The clavicule, or Key of Solomon, was a book written in the 1200s. In it are conjurations to command and control angels of darkness. In many of the operations listed in this book, there's some sort of talk of sacrifice, making a sacrifice to a demon in various ways. It talks about sacrificing white animals to good spirits, while you want to sacrifice a black animal for an evil spirit, right? Kind of the idea of Roman ancient necromancy, of sacrificing a black animal to the dead or to a demon. That carries on here. They want you to sacrifice a virgin animal in this text. And there actually is a spell in here, an incantation, when you sacrifice the creature. May this sacrifice, which we find it proper to offer unto ye, noble and lofty beings, be agreeable and pleasing unto your desires. Be ye ready to obey us, and ye shall receive greater ones, as in even bigger sacrifices. The Picatrix, right, is a book made by an Arabic scholar in Spain in about 1000 AD. Animal sacrifices are involved in this book, all right? There's the white dove you sacrifice to Venus, a black billy goat you'll sacrifice to honor Saturn. It contains a binding spell in here, what we call witchcraft, controlling others, or binding magic. It says, when you wish to bind a man or woman, make an image of a man whose feet are raised to the heavens and whose head is in the ground. This should be made of wax. I have bound such and such a woman in all his veins until he does not have a man's desire. After that, bury the image in his path, and he will not use a woman for as long as the image lasts. So the idea is to make someone impotent, to bind them and make them impotent, which isn't particularly nice, right? One magic spell that we've unearthed here is a Runic one from Iceland in the 1600s. It instructs the reader to write a series of runic symbols in blood on a white calf skin, which are, and we'll quote him here, afflict your belly with great shitting and shooting pains, and all these may afflict your belly with great farting. May your bones split asunder, may your guts burst, may your farting never stop, neither day nor night. May you become as weak as the fiend Loki, who was snared by all the gods. In your mightiest name, Lord God, Spirit Creator, Odin, Bor, Savior, Freya, Oper, Satan, Beelzebub, Helper, you who protect your followers, etc., etc. All right, so they're calling on God, they're calling on Satan, they're calling on demons, they're calling on anyone who will listen to them, right, in order to curse this poor person with incredible bowel trouble. Okay? This example of evil magic. Now, these grimoires are obviously going to attract the interest of the Inquisition, right? Of the church. For hundreds of years, the Inquisition has been hunting Christian heretics, right? And the discovery of these grimoires is kind of going to put their focus on devil worshippers. The idea of this boogeyman is in existence is going to come from the existence of these grimoires. The publication of the book by a German inquisitor, Malus Maleficarum, or Hammer of the Witches, in 1487, the book is going to talk about all these beliefs that are contained in the grimoires. And it's going to be fairly damning propaganda on witchcraft and devil worship. It's going to be the second most popular book in Europe for the next 2 centuries, right? To give you an idea, only the Bible sells more copies. So this propaganda about witches is going to be spread far and wide across Europe. The influential German abbot and occultist, Tremithius, actually was caught owning a book named the Book of Simon the Magician. It instructs that the magician stand in the middle of a magical circle and say 3 times, these words. I adjure you, O Lucifer, and all thy associates, by the living God, by the angels above and below, by so-and-so, and in the name of blank and blank, I furthermore adjure you by Beelzebub, your Lord. I moreover adjure you by Satan, in whose hands are the keys of Gehenna. I adjure you by Lucifer, your king. I adjure you by the mighty deep. I adjure you by the law of the Lord that you shall have no power to stand in the air, nor beneath the air, nor the earth, nor in the heavens, or beneath the heavens, nor on any place in this world. Thou, O Lucifer, with thy associates, or that thou shalt send 3 of thy servants, who shall tell me the truth concerning all that I shall inquire of them. In the name of Agla, Aglata, you know what? I've seen this mistake made before in movies, and we're not going to do it. I'm not going to finish reading the spell out loud, just to be extra safe, because I don't want any of this nonsense in my house. I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night hearing weird noises. So, but we do get an idea that, there are people owning these grimoires that have nasty contents that do advocate for devil worship and demon worship, and that people are owning these books. So we'll now investigate some of the accused witches of the period that probably, maybe, were actually real practitioners of evil magic. In the year 1670 in Scotland, Thomas Weir turned himself in and confessed with no torture involved. He announced he had committed incest with his sister, had sex with animals, was a witch, and had a pact with the devil, including owning a magical staff. The authorities did not believe him until his sister actually came forward and confirmed his story, and they were both put to death. Now, what kind of an individual will walk into a police station and start blabbering all this nonsense? Well, somebody who's not well in the head, right? In 1623, authorities in Moulins, a town in central France, arrested and interrogated Jean-Michel Manasseur, who stood accused of having a pact with the devil. He was accused of practicing magic in his 50s and apparently had been banned 20 years earlier and for invoking evil spirits. He traveled to England, he traveled around, and he got caught again for doing the same thing in Vienna for purchasing a magic vial containing a spirit named Bull, as well as practicing illegal medicine. Well, that's pretty odd, right? He got caught, he got banished, he got a second chance, he got caught doing the same stuff again. In 1593, a theology student at Tübingen University made a pact with the devil that is still preserved to this day. It read, I, David Lipzig, from the Erfurt in Thuringen, write and inform you, Aruhan in hell, that I want to make a pact with you and be yours. When you will presently, when I come home again, leave 3 golden guilders next to this letter, and afterwards will give me what I covet, in anticipation of your answer. So here we have an actual evidence of a real pact made with the devil. There's no misinterpreting that. Someone has made a pact with the devil in exchange for riches. Now, this is actually a common theme. Julia Tofana, a poisoner, created a poison and sold it to women throughout Italy. Her poison, just named Aqua Tofana, was a slow-acting poison that allowed women who were in unhappy marriages to poison their husbands. She would be charged with over 600 counts of murder and executed in Rome. This one's true. We know this one happened. Again, there's no devil worship here, but there is poison, and that has always been known as an insidious and diabolical form of magic. Similarly, in the mid-1600s, a incredibly foolish woman in Paris bragged about how many lives she had taken with poison. Word got around to the chief of police, and they were unable to cover a large coven of occultists that had been selling poison. The head of the organization was a woman named Voisin, right? Meaning neighbor. Voisin was a famous fortune teller who, in her testimony, states she started out as a fortune teller, and then it slowly grew to more insidious things, including poison later on. Importantly, she was not tortured, right? She confessed this willingly. Of the members of this coven, La Tryon even had a human corpse hanging from the ceiling in her house like a chandelier. Okay, she got caught red-handed doing some stuff. The coven was offering ceremonious pacts with the devil to their clients. The pact with the devil guaranteeing them riches or whatever else they wish for in life. One occultist named Lesage, who was not a member of the coven, was able to provide details on these practices, stating that they had performed some sort of dark ritual on the womb of a woman, and that she had been previously approached by the coven about joining and making a pact with the devil himself. Okay, so they're using naked women as human altars to perform their ceremonies on. One of the coven members, named La Filestre, told authorities that she had been forced to give birth within a circle of burning candles. The other members, of course, recited incantations around her. She had been forced to renounce her baptism, and once she delivered her child, the baby was taken away, never to be seen again. She stated that she feared her baby may have been offered as a sacrifice to the devil. Lesage confirmed this, right? He says, look, La Filestre's baby had been taken to be killed in a holocaust or burnt offering to the devil. He also reported that another baby had been purposefully aborted to be sacrificed, as well as that a girl of about 14 or 15 had been kidnapped and sacrificed by this coven. Voisin's own daughter, ironically, would testify to this, right? She would testify something similar, that she had witnessed rituals of women being lain down naked on a mattress while a shaman performed rituals over them. Gueborg, the occultist, who was often the shaman presiding over these rituals with a naked lady, one of the other occultists, Marie Montvoisin, told authorities that the entrails of aborted children have been used in magical ceremonies, and that on one occasion, Gueborg had actually slit the throat of a child that had been born prematurely, pouring the blood into a chalice and consecrating it with the host, as in Voisin. Gueborg would later admit to this, and he actually recounted how he had sacrificed the child over a woman's belly, right? They're using a naked woman as a human altar. He drained the baby's blood with a canif, right? A thing in the neck. And recited the following incantation. Astaroth, Asmodeus, Prince of Affection, I conjure you to accept the sacrifice that I present you of this child for the things that I demand of you. He stated that the dead child was then taken into another room where the entrails and heart were taken out and offered as sacrifice. He also stated that a woman provided him with her menstrual blood in a chalice, and then he would go on to masturbate in the chalice and add bat's blood and flour into it in order to create a poison. Now, whether these extremely disturbing details of human sacrifice or devil worship are true, this coven was definitely guilty of poisoning people. Okay, Voisin, who was never tortured, confessed to poisoning numerous people in the royal court, which is why they're going to get in so much trouble to begin with, is because they're selling this stuff to nobles. It is believed that between 1,000 and 2,500 people were poisoned to death by this coven, right? Primarily through them selling poison to individuals who wish to poison others, right? kind of acting as these middlemen. It seems indeed that they were distributing poisons, because Voisin confessed to this without torture. The evil rituals involving the sacrifice of infants, of course, we cannot confirm. The daughter's testimony does lend credence to the idea of such, and we do have certainly plenty of corroborating testimony, but there's just no way to know for sure whether these details are real. It's very likely that they were committing abortions, right? This was apparently in the wheelhouse, their wheelhouse. They offered healing, all sorts of things the Coven did, including abortions and selling poisons as well. In 1440, Gilles de Reyes, a French lord, was accused of molesting and then murdering children in the hundreds. Reyes was arrested after he kidnapped a priest. Never do that. His friends and accomplices in his crimes testified against him, giving detailed accounts of his crime. A sorcerer named Prelati stated that he had consulted Reyes and lent him books on magic. Reyes was said to have then on 3 occasions attempted to summon a demon named Baron. However, the summoning of the demon was unsuccessful, and he became furious at Prelati over these results. Obviously, he's going to be put to death and found guilty. Probably definitely guilty of murdering people and molesting them. The witchcraft element, we don't know. Probably, though. This is probably a real case of someone embracing evil magic. Evil people have a tendency to gravitate towards any kind of evil thing, including evil magic, so it wouldn't surprise me. In 1597, there is a Belgian monk named Jean Davies who approached authorities and informed them that he was a witch. Right? He voluntarily told them that. He said a stranger in the woods had made a deal with him, and that if he became a monk and poisoned people, he would be given riches. He even states that he attended witches' sabbaths. They didn't believe his story. The authorities didn't actually believe his story. So what do they do to get the truth? Well, they tortured him. So here's a fellow who confesses to being a witch, and they're like, we don't believe you. We're going to torture you and get to the truth. However, despite all the torture, he stuck to his claims, and he was put to death. Now, we just mentioned the witches' sabbath, right? The Black Mass or the witches' sabbath. These are purported orgies that were said to have taken place in the forest in the dead of night by firelight. There is wild dancing, there is sex, there is flying, there is interaction with the devil, etc. These sorts of events are recorded in testimony by accused witches, many of them under torture, some not. We don't know what to make of this, right? It's not an easily explained phenomena. Most scholars tend to lead on the safe side and say there were no witches' sabbaths. My opinion on the matter is that these events were possible. We certainly have the Bacchae in the Greek and Roman world engaging in wild ritual dancing orgies involving animal sacrifice. The necromancer of ancient yore fits many of these descriptions, playing around with dead bodies at night, sacrificing animals, and they're doing it in a secluded location by firelight, often involving dancing. So the idea of such rituals, such as a Black Mass or a witches' sabbath, isn't really as far-fetched as one might imagine. There is a historical impetus for this, right? But maybe we're looking at the idea of the witches' sabbath in the wrong way by calling them rituals, by thinking of them that way. Maybe we should be thinking of them as parties gone wild. We know that some practitioners of magic use drugs in order to obtain their visions. This is also true in Europe at the time, right? Most of these are going to be alkaloids such as mandrake, Jimson weed, and the deadly nightshade. Taken in the right manner and the right dosage, these poisons become hallucinogenic drugs of the highest order. Don't get any ideas. Now, what sort of experience does an alkaloid user have? We have a modern testament to this by an alkaloid addict in 1966. He writes about the effect of this kind of drug. My teeth were clenched, and in a dizzied rage took possession of me. But I also know that I was permeated by a peculiar sense of well-being connected with this crazy sensation that my feet were growing lighter, expanding and breaking loose from my own body. Each part of my body seemed to be going off onto its own, floating away. And I was seized with the fear that I was falling apart. At the same time, I experienced an intoxicating sensation of flying. I soared where my hallucinations, the clouds, the lowering sky, herds of beasts, falling leaves, billowing streamers of steam and rivers of molten metal were swirling along. So this fellow is having hallucinatory feelings of flight and all sorts of other things. Just as many witches were said to take flight at these witches' sabbaths, right? So these people are using the same kinds of drugs, prone to a sensation of flying, apparently, is the effect of this drug. Now, how might a witch use a hallucinogenic drug? And what in the world is going on with the association of witches flying and straddling a broomstick while they do so? Well, in 1324, an investigation of an alleged witch discovered in rifling the closet of the lady, they found a pipe of ointment wherewith she greased a staff, upon which she ambled and galloped through thick and thin, as in she rode the staff that was covered in a ointment. Okay, so this suggests she rode the stick like a horse, rubbing the drug on her pubic region. In the record of Jordanus de Bergamo, he writes, "But the vulgar believe, and the witches confess, that on certain days and nights they anoint a staff and ride on it in the appointed place, or anoint themselves under the arms and in other hairy places." Okay? Here we see the testament that witches are applying hallucinogenic drugs to the areas between their legs via a staff. This is actually rather effective. Areas where there are sweat glands, sweat membranes, the armpit area, the pubic area, the anal glands, allow the drugs to enter directly into the system, bypassing the stomach, right? If they ingested it, it would be poisonous, but by applying it to the sweat glands, it bypasses the digestive system and therefore only is going to have hallucinatory effects. So what we have is the use of highly hallucinogenic drugs by witches during the period, by some of these people practicing magic. So what we may be looking at is not quite so much a ritual as it is a party, right? I mean, if one is going to do hallucinogenic drugs, they need to do it in private, right? As in the woods, a time when they wouldn't get caught, so night. They need a light, so there have to be fire. And generally, they get high as a kite and dance around and act otherworldly, as in high as a kite and insane, right? Of course, they'd have hallucinations and visions, and as well at this party. So if you ask them what happened at this party, well, I flew in the trees, and I danced with the devil, and I had a vision of somebody who was dead, and I walked upside down on top of a tree, and I swallowed a bird, and just all sorts of crazy things are going to be said by these people of these events because they were literally on some very powerful drugs. So what's very possible is this witches' Sabbath is a misinterpretation of a wild hallucinogenic drug party. This, however, this kind of a drug party would have to be hosted by magic users because they are the only ones who are going to have this kind of knowledge of drugs and how to use them in this sort of way, right? So I think it's very possible that such strange celebratory instances are occurring in which these drugs were used to see divine visions and connect with the spirit world, right? We do have confessions of individuals in Scotland in the mid-1600s relating to a coven and a practice of a witch's sabbath. Isabel Gaudi is an important source of information. It's tough to tell what's going on with her, but it seems like she did one too many hallucinogenic drugs over the years, and that her brain at this point has become literally fried. Right? Because she's going to confess to being a witch. And she was not tortured, right, in this process. And she's going to say some extremely fantastical things in her confession that are going to look a lot like a drug trip. She would state on meeting the devil for the first time, "The first thing I did that night was deny my baptism. Then I put one of my hands on the crown of my head and the other to the sole of my foot, and renounced all between my two hands to the devil. He was in the reader's desk with a black book in his hand. Margaret Brodie from Audron held me up to the devil to be baptized by him, and he marked me in the shoulder and sucked out my blood from the mark and spat it into his hand, and sprinkling on my head, he said, 'I baptize thee, Janet, in my own name.'" She described the devil. "He was big, dark, hairy man, very cold. I found his cum or semen as cold within me as spring well water. Sometimes he had boots and sometimes shoes on his feet, but his feet were always forked and cloven. Sometimes he would be with us as a deer, right, or a roe." She states that her coven, this is where we actually get into the black magic here. She states that her coven made a clay image to kill the Laird O'Park's male children. All right, so she's after this Laird's children. A Laird is a lord, Scottish word for lord. She says, "John Taylor brought the clay home in a fold of his plaid, and his wife broke it up very small like a meal. She sifted it into a sieve and poured water into it in the devil's name, and kneaded it hard until it looked like rye dough, and made an image of one of the Laird's sons. It had all the parts and features of a child: head, eyes, nose, hand, feet, mouth, little lips. It wanted none of a child's features, and its hands were folded down by its side. Its texture was like a crab or a scraped and scalded piglet." So basically they made a dough baby, an effigy, or a voodoo doll made of dough of this Lord's son. "We put its face near the fire until it shriveled with heat. Then we put it amongst the hot embers until it glowed red like coal. After that we would roast it now and then. Every other day a part of it would be well roasted. All the Laird's male children will suffer by it if it isn't found and broken, as well as those who've been born and died already. It was still being put in and out of the fire in the devil's name. It was hung up on a peg. It's still there in John Taylor's house, and it has a clay cradle around it." Another member of this coven, Janet Broadhead, also described the effigy used for the murder. "It was very roughly made, like rye dough. It was about the size of a seaweed or a crab, and had all the features of a boy: head, face, eyes, nose, mouth, and its hands were folded by its side. It was put near the fire till it dried out and wrinkled, and then we placed hot coals till it was hard. Then we took it out of the fire and wrapped it in a cloth and hid it away on a shelf or sometimes under a chest. Every day we would wet it, then roast and bake it, and every second day we would turn it at the fire until the Lord's child died of this. Then we hid it away and didn't touch it again until the next male child was born. Within 6 months of that child being born, we took the clay image from its cradle and cloth, and every now and then we dip it in water, like we did to the first one that died. Every other day we'd bake it and roast it until the new Lord's child had died as well." Very strange, right? So we have some imitation magic occurring in which they're using a voodoo doll to kill people, particularly these Lord's sons. They're also doing it in other ways, right? Black magic. Isabel Gaudy described how the Coven killed a sick man that they didn't like, named Harry Forbes, in the winter of 1660. He is a minister. Harry Forbes was sick. We made a bag of galls, flesh, and guts of toads, some barley, finger and toenail clippings, the liver of a hare, and bits of cloth. We mixed it all together and steeped it overnight in water, all minced together. And when we put it in the water, Satan was with us, and he learned us the following words to say 3 times over, that go like this: He is lying in his bed. He is lying sick and sore. Let him lie in his bed 2 months and 3 days more. Let him lie in his bed. Let him lie in it sick and sore. Let him lie in his bed 2 months and 3 days more. You get the idea. It just repeats itself. When we had learned all the words from the devil, as I said, we all fell down on our knees with our hair down over our shoulders and eyes, and our hands lifted up. With our eyes fixed steadfastly upon the devil, and said the words correctly 3 times against Mr. Harry Forbes recovering from his sickness. During the night we crept into Mr. Forbes' bedroom, where he lay, with our hands all smeared with the mixture of the bag, to swing it over Mr. Harry as he lay sick in his bed. And during the day we sent one of our number, who was familiar and intimate with him, to ring or swing the bag upon Mr. Harry. So, and they're cursing this guy with this to kill him, this sick man, to make him even more sick and die, trying to speed on his death, this minister's death, with this strange concoction of dead frogs and toenail clippings and the whatnot. Either way, an example of evil magic and diabolical or demonic magic. Her confession was not under torture, right? She confessed this willingly. So we seem to have found, just going through this, evidence of individuals that had actually been guilty of practicing witchcraft. And when I mean witchcraft, I mean evil magic and or demon or devil worship. Now, whether these individuals suffered from insanity or were practicing witches, we will never know. Perhaps they were a combination of the both, and that seems likely from some of these accounts. We could have discussed obviously the many thousands of cases of poor innocent people being put to death in the period for witchcraft, but that wouldn't really teach us anything about witchcraft in the period, now would it? So, but what you need to know is that the stereotypes are true, okay? Many, many, many innocent people were put to death for witchcraft who weren't even practitioners of magic to begin with, much less devil worship. In fact, almost the vast majority of these people are Christians, right, that are innocently being accused of witchcraft and put to death. Now, some pagan beliefs or magics obviously survived in the Middle Ages, but paganism itself, the religion, did not, right? It's definitely dead by the time we get into the 1500s, when the witch hunts really begin occurring. All right, we have a roughly 1,000-year period where they're not really hunting witches or pagans and the whatnot in Christianity, in Christian thought, right? And they don't really start going after them until the 1500s. And again, they're not going after just magicians, right, or healers or magic users. They're really way more obsessed with the idea of the witch and getting these devil worshippers, right? So, although occasionally general practitioners of magic, healers, whatnot, are being persecuted against, the number is very, very, very low. The vast majority of what they're after is these people they think are in league with the devil. Okay? These witch hunts, where this is going to take place is going to be the vast majority of this witch fervor is going to take place in Germany, Switzerland, and France, right? It's in those locations that the witch fervor is going to be primarily occurring, right? Little bits in other places, but it's really centered in those areas I just mentioned. We took a look at all this evidence we presented. As we talked about, the most majority of these people are innocent, but there is something going on here in this period when it comes to witchcraft and evil magic, as we can see by confessions that are not under torture and in grimoires and written evidence of pacts with the devil through the period, that devil worship, demonic worship, and evil magic exist. Okay, they existed in the Middle Ages, they existed in the Renaissance, and that's important to understand. Now, there are some of these, that there is the boogeyman that the Inquisition is after, it looks like is based on something real actually happening in the period. I hope you enjoyed our presentation on witchcraft in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. I recommend watching our video, Magic in the Middle Ages, right? Just to get a better idea on what the non-malevolent magic in the period was occurring, as well as magical beliefs, and more on the church's opinion on magic in general. We've also done excellent videos on magic in ancient Greece, as well as evil magic in ancient Rome, things like necromancy. Folks, please, if you will, like, subscribe, comment. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for watching us, and I hope you enjoyed this subject on the witchcraft and devil worship in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. We'll see you next time.